Facebook thing and join this site, you can add information.
We're putting
I'll talk about that later. There's that stone again. They're pretty well eroded. After,
Yeah,
what do we have, 275 years ago? Now there's east of Delmar, 8 miles, there's a church called the Line Church. And I was told there was a marker there.
that's it.
In the graveyard, is that it?
That's it.
Okay,
got a
I didn't know
hollow
for
place
sure or
inside.
not.
Yeah, they say they busted walnuts or pecans in the top of it years ago. There's a hollow place in the center of the top of
Yeah,
it.
a little bit.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
There isn't a mark left on this one, this
No,
was
there's
never
not.
recarved.
No.
I was I walked that whole cemetery.
It's
Where
just
the heck-
right out of the, it's barely out of the cemetery.
It's right
not
outside
around
of it, yeah.
Yeah,
As soon as I got in the truck and started to leave, I was like, I think that's it.
that's it.
So I took a picture of it, and I was hoping you were here tonight to tell me it was it. Now, this is the middle point.
Well, there is
This is the structure that's built around the middle point markers. There's markers here from the 4 men that originally surveyed this, and when Mason and Dixon came along, 13 or 14 years afterwards, they adjusted, I think it was 22 or 23 inches off, they determined the original markers. So this is an original crown stone that was set by Mason and Dixon. And that point right there is the corner of, southwest corner of Delaware. The gray stone is one that was put in by the original surveying crew. And the other 2, I'm not sure of the significance of why there's 3 or what each one might have represented, because they're very well eroded by now. Do you know?
number 25 stone was east, let's see.
This is 35.
Yeah, I know. It's 34, and it likes 200 feet of being 35.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, after number 20 in Line Church, there was one right across the road on 54, 5 miles west from Line Church, and it got hit with a car 2 or 3 times.
Oh.
And the state took it up, and they stored it for years, and then they didn't know what to do with it, so they put it in there. That's it, and you can't hardly find a mark on it, but that's it.
That's it.
The other stone, Mr. Wright found in the field and didn't know what to do with it, and set it up beside there,
keeping everything.
according to Mr. Wright.
Wow, okay, that's interesting information. I would have never known that. It's nothing like
And
that.
Mason and Dixon never set that stone,
Which one, this one?
that big one. They were already back in England when that stone was set. The commission set it, but they had left.
Okay, well, according to what I found in their notes, they were, 1766, they were informed that stones were delivered and then placed them. And there was a big, at each one, the commissioners.
But they didn't place that corner one.
They didn't do the corner.
Replaced the other ones.
They did all the other ones. Oh, huh,
They
interesting.
sent 20 stones to Twilford's Wharf outside the Sharp Tap.
Mm-hmm.
20 stones. They used 6 of them.
Well, let's see here, I have, in October 24th, 1766, Mason and Dixon were in Newcastle and were instructed to set stones. They found
Yes.
out that 50 stones were,
Across, on the other side of, it was 50 stones on the other side of Sharptown, and 20 on this side of Sharptown, on the
Okay.
south side.
yeah, some were delivered up the Nanticoke River to a man's farm, and the rest were delivered to Denton up the Chop Tank. Okay. So this is the middle point, and that's a little better picture of the markers. And what do I have? Oh, that's out my window of the apartment. This is, so the confusion with the Transpeninsular Line being called the Mason-Dixon line starts at a lot of places. This is the marker at Selbyville, the 10-mile marker, and it's marked on the maps as the Mason-Dixon Transpeninsular Line. And so if you go to Fenwick, there's a Mason and Dixon motel on the line. I think there's a shopping center and some other things that that's kind of caught on. And at the lighthouse, there was a marker saying this is the start of the Mason and Dixon line, and that was removed.
Mason and Dixon only made one trip on the Transpeninsular Line.
To
It
the
was a
middle
Sunday
point.
that they wanted to see the Pocomoke Forest.
Yeah,
So they rode to the Pocomoke Forest and back, and they never went. That's the only time they were down the Transpeninsular.
that's the only time they were there, yeah. But they weren't surveying, they just
No,
went
they
there.
weren't surveying.
They were tourists.
visiting.
Yeah, they wanted to see it because there were so many legends about the Pocomoke. It was
Yeah.
nothing like it is today. It was a forest, it was swamp, it wasn't drained, there were no roads. So,
Yeah, I'd like to go
But-
there.
what's that?
Sounds like a place I'd like to go.
Right, there were escaped slaves living there,
Depending on the weather, go down home and you'll get a good look at it.
what's that now?
I said, depending on the weather, go down where I was born and raised at, you'll see that.
It still looks like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr. Watson
Oh.
and Parsons field notes for doing the Transpeninsular Line. The notes are in the Maryland Historical Society in Baltimore.
Oh,
The
yeah.
original notes of
Yeah.
theirs.
yeah,
There's 44 pages of it.
yeah,
You can read it page by
You can
page.
read it, they'll let you look right through it.
yeah, yeah. I have that, in the Facebook thing, I have a link to that where you can open that file up and see the journal. So this is the Line Church, which is, well, it seems like everybody knows where it is. It's about 8 miles east of Delaware. Line Church. And so this is how you find the middle point. You're on Route 50, you get off at Route 54, and it's right there on your left. You'll see that structure with the roof on it that I showed you. It's very easy to find. And this is a little close-up of it, but you pull off right into this little loop road here and park, and it's only a few feet away. Just another view, except I have east and up on this. This is coming down 50, and then you would take 54 over to there. So, I think that's all of the pictures I have in that group. So with that, the main reason I'm here and doing this is with James Island being rebuilt. This point that's submerged now is gonna someday come up out of the waves and be on land again with when the island's rebuilt. And I'd like to get interest enough to keep this going to where there's a marker put there someday, or something close to where it was supposed to be. And besides a marker, if a navigational marker was put at that point as well to let you know there was land there where there wasn't land before, that would be even better. But I don't know how to keep that, how to keep this going, to keep interest in order to get the state or the Corps of Engineers to commit to doing that. I've been in touch with, I still get mailings about the rebuilding of the islands, and I've been in touch with each person from the Corps of Engineers that's in charge of this project, and they've all shown interest. The last fellow I talked to, he lived over by Fenwick, and he went up and looked at the marker, and of course he thought it was a great idea, but I never heard anything back from him after that. And but James Island's gonna take 30 years to do, so I don't know who's gonna be around when it's finished, but we gotta it'd be nice to get this going and get somebody on the Corps of Engineers to commit to that happening when they finally finish the island. And you know, what do we have? It's gonna be year 2055 approximately when that's finished. So that's a long time to keep this in people's memory. It'd be nice to get a hard commitment on it, and I'm not sure how to do that, but maybe this is a start, you know, to get people talking about this. And so, that's what I have on the Transpeninsular Line. I don't know how much interest there is in, well, there's always some interest in Mason and Dixon. As I said, they came here, they were contracted originally in 1763 by the Royal Society. They chose Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon as the surveyors to come here. And they arrived in Philadelphia November 15, 1763. And from there they knew they had to survey a line from the southernmost point of Philadelphia west to determine, they had to determine the line, the east-west border of Maryland, between Maryland and Pennsylvania, to be 15 miles south of the furthest south point in Philadelphia. So in order for them to do that, they had to project a line straight from that point west in Pennsylvania to a place called Emoryville, where there's a location called Stargazer's Rock, and a fellow named John Harlan had a farm there. The house is still there, the rock's still there. This is not far from where I live. It's about 10 miles from my home. And so they set up there, and apparently John Harlan was pretty hospitable, because every winter they went back to his farm and spent their winters there. And of course at that time there was no light infusion, and it was a great place to set up their instruments and get calculations and figure out exactly where they were on the planet. So they did that, and then they continued their survey south to determine the point where they would go west. And at that point, there was still a lot of problems between the white settlers and the Indians. Right around that time in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there was a gang that turned on the local Indians who were pacifists and did some just outrageous things with murdering them and slaughtering off this group of people. And so the 6 nations, the 6 tribes were still, it was pretty aggressive. So Mason and Dixon were first supposed to do, let me bring this back up. They were first supposed to survey from here across, and because of the Indian problems, they were told to come down here to do the line from the corner of Delaware to the radius that goes around Newark. There's a 12-mile radius around Newark that had been established and surveyed and agreed on. So they had to connect this point with that circle. The original surveyors of the Transpeninsular Line and others tried to do that twice and failed. And so the Penns and Calverts requested help from England, and that's when Mason and Dixon were sent here. And Mason and Dixon, because it's not a straight north line, it's called a tangent line. And a tangent line is a line that intersects a circle, but it doesn't go past it. So the circle around Newark was established, and they had to connect this point from the middle point to the circle, and calling it a tangent line. So Mason and Dixon set out starting at the middle point, and they had a group of 40 men, you know, everything from cooks to axemen, wagon men, tent men, and then the men that helped them with their measuring equipment. They used a thing called a chain, which is approximately 66 feet long, and they would do that to make their precise measurements. And so every night they would be in a different location, and they would calculate the time by the stars, and they would calculate their position on the planet. They would calculate north, and then they would shoot north. Of course, that would always be the North Star. And then from there, they would turn the instrument perfectly plumb, perfectly straight up and down, and they would be able to figure out what time it was by the transition of the stars. And the celestial time is different than what we're used to. We're used to solar time on 24 hours. Celestial time is 4 minutes shorter every day. So when you start doing the math, you know, the days are shorter. But they worked with all this. And they did a lot of their work at night because they, I think I mentioned before, they would set up posts and there would be a man with a candle out there and they could see him. And then the lines would be put down and the markers, and they used oak posts. So they, every mile they put a post from the middle point to up by Newark, and they ended up only about 1,400 feet off of the radius that was originally laid out. So once they got there, they had men from the original surveying crew that were familiar with things. They'd been there before, and they found one of the original posts from the radius. They measured that as 1,400 feet. Now, using triangulation, they knew, using geometry, they knew how far each post at every mile or every 5 miles or wherever they wanted, how much it had to be moved in order to make that line straight. So that's what they did. They returned in 1766 with the markers, and then they set the markers and where they belonged at each 5 miles, and at each one when it was set, the local commissioners were there, and I guess it was a big deal doing all this. And so at that point they were finished that. There were 2 other lines they surveyed in the northern part of Delaware, since the tangent line's on an angle. Then at the point where it met the circle, they made a line that went straight north went north and then met with this line at what would be this corner. I don't have a better drawing of that. And then they did another short survey in that area, and then their 4th survey and final survey was the survey across the north-south border of Maryland and Pennsylvania. So, yeah, so the only place on the Transpeninsular Line that Mason and Dixon were was at the middle point, and then, as you mentioned, they went on the tour of went on an adventure into the Pocomoke to see what was going on there. And that is pretty much it. There's a lot more detail and a lot more notes about Mason and Dixon and the Transpeninsular Line, but I think I pretty much covered what we need to cover here.
George, could you talk again about those 2 yellow lines that went to the Chesapeake Bay?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference between the 2 of them when you get to the Taylor's Island area.
There they are. Well, this one, the lower one would be, the point I put the lower one in was that the original surveyors, the line that they surveyed, let me get a long picture. The line that they're surveyed is this line, the upper yellow line here, down and through. And as from the stuff I read, from the things I read, it's been guessed that they did this in a great arc, which if you look at the lines, it is on an arc. And how they did that, no one really knows. It's not in the journals of the original surveyors. It's just a mystery. But they, if they had gone perfectly straight, which they seem to be having a bit of trouble doing, they would have started at Fenwick and still ended up at Taylor's Island, but at a different point, much further south of James Island.
Sorry, right about where my house is.
Is that where you are?
Yeah, I know.
Well, if you go on Google,
Right on point.
Is there a stone there?
rocks in his driveway. But if you go on, if any of you use Google Earth, you can go on there and do this. You use, at the top, you'll see a little tiny ruler, and that's for measuring, and then you just click on a point anywhere, zoom the map in and out, and once you click that point, you move to your next point, like say the middle point or wherever you want it, and then click that, and it'll give you the straight distance between the 2 points.
So which one is considered to be the most official one?
Official as far as what?
I don't know.
on the west side.
On the west side, well, that would be the upper one, because the
Oh.
documents, the agreement, between the Penn and the Calverts clearly states that it ended on the southern end of James Island. So, that's where it is.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about it going to James Point, but James Point
Well, James,
locally is the one that's on the north end, and what you're talking about is on the south end.
on the south end, yeah, when I was researching this 10 years ago, I found one map that just called that part of the island James Point. And then this, as the agreement that they have says, James Island, southern end of James Island. So that was in the original agreement between the Calverts and Penns.